Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. On behalf of ACTE, I'm Audrey Marshall, and we are very, very thankful that you all are here today for our recording. I want to introduce you to Ms. Candace Mott, who is going to welcome everyone here this evening or this morning. Thank you, Ms. Mott.
Thank you, Audrey. Good afternoon. My name is Candace Mott, and I am the IAD manager for ACTE, and I am happy to be here today. CTE programs are the gateways for our students to recognize their unique strengths, discover how these strengths can affirm, as the description of the webinar says, their space in the world. As CTE educators and stakeholders, we possess an extraordinary power to unlock unimaginable possibilities for our students. Today, let us seize the opportunity to foster mutual growth, inspiration, and learning as we delve into the limitless potential of our CTE program. Together, we can empower our students to dream, unearth their passions, and construct bridges for inclusive access, equity, and diversity to yield success. So thank you, Region 2, for having me here today. And now we will have Beth Parks, Region 2 Vice President.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I am Beth Parks. I serve as your Region 2 ACTE Vice President. I'm excited to be here with you all today and so glad you're able to take some time to join us for this presentation. This is our second IAED presentation of this year, and we're super excited today to have Dr. Broadhead with us. I do want to introduce, you already kind of met her at the beginning, our moderator for today is going to be Miss Audrey Marshall. And I just want to give a special thanks to Miss Marshall. She serves as our Region 2 Social Committee Chair, and she has really been the legwork behind bringing this presentation to you today. So I want to thank her for all of her hard work in that. And at this time, I'm going to go on and turn it back over to Miss Marshall, and she is going to get us rolling.
Okay. And thank you so much, Beth. And thank you also, Ms. Motts, for being here today and starting us off. Today, we want to, again, welcome you all here to this presentation with Dr. Broadhead. If you have any questions, there is a Q&A section that you can also place any questions that you may have in addition to using the chat if you wish to do that directly or privately. But as you have questions, please feel free to place those items or those questions into that section. And after Dr. Broadhead's presentation, we will be certain to address those things for you at the conclusion or the end, toward the end of the presentation. At this time, I'd like to welcome Ms. Susan Hall, who is going to be with us, and she will be introducing Dr. Broadhead. She is one of our ACTE middle level representatives, and she is just a wonderful resource and was also the person responsible for helping us to secure Dr. Broadhead today. And thank you, and I will turn it over to Ms. Hall. Thank you so very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is with great pleasure and excitement that I get to introduce to you Dr. Marcus Broadhead. He is the Director of New School Design and Development at the Utopian Academy for the Arts Charter Network. He is an amazing inspirational leader, speaker, author that truly knows how to bring out the best in his staff and his students. I'm excited to hear what he has to say today. So let's get started.
All right. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen to get started. Give me 2 seconds. All right. Now, first and foremost, I definitely appreciate this opportunity to come speak with you guys today to building student capacity through CTE programming and to help you to become the spark for every student. I am extremely impressed by those of you who are here taking this moment to spend some time to listen to me run my mouth, especially since you are, and I would assume, at a place of summer, right? So you are even more engaged people. You're a group of people who are really doing the best that you possibly can for your students, and you're taking that time to invest in yourselves. So I really appreciate it. And I guess to your advantage that no one's on the screen, I hope that you make yourself as comfortable as possible, whether you're on a beach or whether you are someplace in a place of peace with a drink of your choice, is to have a little bit more fun with this. Anytime I say the word intentional, you can go ahead and have a little sip of the drink of your choice and I think by the time I'm done, I think you'd have the most memorable, or maybe not that memorable because you probably won't remember it because I say attention maybe too many times. But at any rate, I think that we can have a great time. And I believe that everything that I share with you, for the most part, is really about shifting. I really think that a lot of us have the tools that we need, but it's a matter of perspective that we need to inject into what we do that helps brings things to a lot more clarity with regard to the work, the very important work that we're doing. So just to be respectful of your time, I just want to show you there is a roadmap for us to have a conversation today. And a lot of the words that are on the screen are things that you've come across, vision and outcome and walls and obstacles. But I really want to start from a place of positioning. And the reason why I say positioning has a lot to do with the context by which I'm going to have this conversation with you guys today. That guy on the screen that looks like a public library media specialist and supervisor, that's me. And I just wanted to let you know that as a director of New School Design and Development for Utopian Academy of the Arts Charter Network here in Georgia, we are an arts-based public charter school. And what is important to note about that is that we've leaned into the idea of economic development by saying the school is a place by which skills can be imparted to students so that when they get to a point where they're going to make that transition to the real world, so to speak, that they actually have those skills. And our founder, Dr. Artesius Miller, has recognized very, very far, I guess, very early on, how the arts were being removed from school due to budget cuts and things of that nature. But it left a very huge gap in the creative space for students who really wanted to go into areas where they can become their own this or their own that. And especially since Georgia has become this hub, this new Hollywood location, we wanted to be able to provide students who live in Georgia with the opportunity to fill those many important positions here in the state of Georgia without outsourcing. So he is the embodiment of a lot of the foundation of the conversation that we're going to have today. But prior to that, I served as principal in a traditional system as middle school, where I met the wonderful Susan Hall for 7 years. And prior to that, I was an assistant principal of a high school, several high schools, actually 2 high schools in Fayette County, Georgia. And then prior to that, I served students by way of ELA, high school and middle school students between New York and Georgia in my journey as a high school English teacher. So prior to that, though, what's interesting to note is that entire journey was built upon spite. I got into education out of spite. I got into education out of frustration, and I'm gonna share with you what that means in a minute. But prior to this canon event of me being upset with the world, upset with the system of education, I had no idea of what I wanted to be. I had no clue. I wasn't one of those people who were young and had dolls set up and bossed them around and said I was teaching, or made my friends do certain things and say, hey, I always wanted to teach and this great influence. That was never the case for me. And so prior to that, I would say that my concept of work or the real world came from just the innocence of wanting. Like it came from, and I remember just starkly, I was in 6th grade. I was about to be 11 because I'm a June baby. So I'm about to be 11. And it was a point in time in my life where I realized that the things that I wanted, I couldn't have because my parents weren't in the business of providing things that I wanted. And, you know, my dad was a postal police officer. My mom did clerical work, and they moved from Brooklyn, New York to Long Island for the same reasons most would at the end of the 70s, going to 80s, to provide a better opportunity for their children. And of course, that came with a cost. Simply that, you know, by home ownership versus renting, there were sacrifices that needed to be made. And they had 3 children, and all of the things that they did had everything to do with need. So I was a no frills person. I didn't have any name brand anything. I had all the skips in the world. I shared borrowed clothes. I had an older brother. Thank God he was much bigger than I. So physically we couldn't fit each other's clothes, but I definitely at times had to put his clothes on when he was done with them, and an older sister. And they did everything they had to do to provide our needs. So because I was in the business of wants and saying, you know, this is what I want for myself. My first job was working with my uncle. He owned a TV shop, and I swept and cleaned TVs and did whatever he asked me to do for 8 hours, for a total of $20 for that one Saturday. And then I was sweeping floors next door to the barber shop and doing little things, odds and ends, to be able to accumulate some form of money. Because for me, it was all about a transaction. Work was a means to an end. And within the environment that I lived in and resided and hung out, the adults that were around seemed to represent that notion of being in a space where people just worked for their ends to be met. And my I guess my relationship with work wasn't that of a career. My relationship with work wasn't about what I desired to do. My relationship with work had everything to do with a transaction. And it took some time before I realized that although we were a working class family, we were in poverty as it pertained to opportunity and exposure. I was impoverished, and I'm gonna lean into that, based upon opportunity and exposure. Because in those two places, it was scarce. We were beholden to public schools. So if anything that we were going to receive, it had to come from the public school system. If we were going to receive any other exposure, it had to come from church. If it wasn't coming from church, a public school was coming from a public library. So there were limits by which we were able to have any exposure. If it happened after school, it's going to be at the library, or it's going to have to be on the school day, it's going to happen at a church. And so we were beholden to whatever the adults were going to provide for us in those spaces. Despite the fact that my brother was very talented as a musician, he had to invest in himself through church. So church had a need for him to be able to play music and play instruments. It was through church. It was through the band. There was no after school investment of money that my parents would find to be able to make that work for them. And so when it came to this idea, when I finally got to a place where I was like, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to be? I was still only looked in terms of this success being binary and success being attached to education. So it was like, you either were a doctor or a lawyer if you were going to be successful. And as far as I could see, besides Heathcliff and Claire Huxtable, those were only doctors and lawyers I knew. And other than that, there was this other thing that you could do, and it was just a typical policeman, fireman, teacher, those respectful and I guess ever-present careers that we see day in and day out, but they just seemed like jobs, means to an end, talk about retirement. And the first very glimpse that I had around just noticing that I had something beyond this work relationship was in my English class in 7th grade. My English teacher used to make us write these stories and read them to the class. And one time she told us, she told me to read, and I read my story, and she loved it. And she said I had a great voice, and I was a very detailed writer. And at that point was the first time I was like, wow, I actually have something that someone likes, right? Something that they enjoy. And I was like, well, wow, that's interesting. But I could not place any idea around being a writer for myself, simply because where did I get books from? The library. Would I read books from outside of that? School. Who are in those books? Dead people. So dead people don't make money. Dead people aren't writers. So in my mind, I'm like, this can't be a career. So then I push that to the side, right? And so as I started, again, becoming more aware of trying to figure out what I was going to do, I was like, well, you know what? I like commercials. I enjoy commercials. And I was like, wow, I wonder if there was something you could do with commercials. But because I was so poor in terms of exposure and poor in terms of opportunity, I had no language to identify the words advertisement or marketing or branding. And I was embarrassed to say that I wanted to do commercials because I didn't know how to articulate that as a career. So I just let that particularly simmer. And so it wasn't until my frustration around the idea that, hey, I want to be something. I want to move beyond this place. I know I'd like to do something. And I know that education is key, because my parents said education, 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 and education is in alignment with what I want to be. But unfortunately, in the system that I attended school, it was mired in a lot of negativity. I can't tell you how much the social construct of the crack epidemic and drug dealing and things of that nature hit our community, to the degree that there was a lot of negativity and violence that actually happened in school. Believe it or not, home I'm safe, but at school, I was hit in the face with ways in which I had to be aware of the violence that definitely was around the corner at any particular point in time. And so there was so much negativity that I recognized that it seeped not only from the students, but it seeped to the adults. And the adults had given up on us in a way that I was like, well, hey, I'm not this negative person. There's more of us that want more for ourselves, and we want to leave. We want to get out of here. We want to excel. We want to do something with ourselves. And you lump this in with these people that probably don't see a better version of themselves. And because of that, your actions have limited who I can possibly be. And so from that frustration, I was fortunate enough to have a friend to say, you know what, I'm going to be a teacher. And I was like, really? I was like, you know what, I'm going to be a teacher too, because I can do a better job than they can. And the program that she was in was after school. It was called Teachers of Tomorrow. And that program was headed by my former elementary school principal. And that particular person took me under her wing and exposed me to things and helped me to do research with her that I uncovered that there was a one-room schoolhouse that we made a historical landmark that was on the site of the middle school. And she did take a liking to me, and then she introduced a scholarship opportunity for me. So I interviewed for a scholarship and got that scholarship, and she worked at Hofstra University, and she exposed me to that and talked about how that would be a great pathway for me to become an education, and found another scholarship for me. And there it was. And that gave me access to being the person I am right now. Those particular modes and means and connections helped me to become the person that I am right now. And so what I want us to understand when it comes to positioning, every last one of you are in the position that will allow you to be the one who can be a transformative vehicle in the lives of your students based upon the strength of your imagination, the strength of your care, and the strength of your willingness to wipe out, eradicate, reduce the poverty of exposure and the poverty of opportunity. Because no matter whether or not we have all of these particular advancements in technology, there's still limitations that students have with respect to exposure and with respect to opportunity. And if we lean more into the eradication of those things, from it being scarce, from providing scarce opportunities for students and scarce exposure for students, to more frequency, to an abundance, that's the area by which you can control the means by which students' trajectory can be more magnanimous than it ever could have been had you not stood in the gap to be able to rectify that situation, because you can support students in that manner. It's way easier to be able to control that level of, I guess, equity than it is to control their social construct of poverty or their social construct that's going to stop them outside of the school system. But by way of you being the answer to the question, what does school have to do with me, has everything to do with your particular positioning. And so what I want you to also sit with is the importance of your vision. I mean, my God, when I had students, parents, teachers that were applying for jobs, and I said, you know what's the vision of your program? What is it that you want it to be like? What ideas do you have around your program? And the reason why that's so important, because it is based upon the degree by which you dream for your program will determine what could happen in a transformational way for students that attend your class. Whether you have a class or a program in and of itself, your dreams, your limits, your bounds, all the things that you could possibly think of is what will determine whether or not that student will have an opportunity far beyond that they can imagine. So what I want you to do first and foremost, as you walk with me in this particular process, is to consider one thing. Did you have vision for your program? I hope that you did. If you didn't have a vision for your program, I want you to think about it this way. And if you do, I want you to think about what I'm talking to you right now and kind of drill down into the manner in which you do have a vision. If all things were equal, what are the experiences that you can imagine that, like, this is great. If I had all the money in the world, I've had all the opportunity in the world, what experiences could I provide for students? What opportunities could I provide for students? And lastly, how many resources it would be enough for you, and where would they come from? Think of all of those things that would be a part of your vision for your program. Okay? Write those things down. Every last one of those things down, answer those questions, write them down. What experiences, what opportunities, what resources, if everything's at your disposal, if the sky's the limit, so on and so forth, what does that look like? The second thing I want you to focus on is outcomes, right? A lot of times we have this vision, we have this broad-based idea of what we look like, what we're looking like, but then we have to drill down to the outcomes. And I want you to think about outcomes in two different buckets. First would be the student outcomes. So it may be as small as, what would that student gain that day? If they had not been in your classroom, what would they not have been able to receive, right, that day? Then from that week, right, what would they have received by the end of that week? Then to all the way to 9 weeks or the semester, to however long your class plays itself out in chunks. And then you say to yourself, okay, what would they gain if I have a three course pathway program? What would they gain by the end of that program? Who are they going to be? What skills would they attain at that point in period of their livelihood, right? In terms of their education. And then on the flip side, I need you to think big about your program itself, right? Because your program also needs to grow with the students. So if you're saying to yourself, okay, year one, this is what my program looks like. What's my program look like in year 3? What are some changes that I'm going to make sure that I have the best opportunities that I could possibly create for my students at this particular level? Think of it this way. If you had a student who went through your program, got to the 3rd year of your particular your program, and they had a sibling that came in at the top or the beginning of that program, right? How different would that program look from the older sibling to the younger sibling? If it looks exactly the same, then we're not doing enough. If it is too familiar and in ways in which you have not raised a level of the experiences that new generation is coming in, then that means we're not investing enough in the things that we need to invest in so that students could continue to have an elevated experience. The next thing I want you to really consider, and I think that this happens more so because a lot of you guys are one of one, like you're the only game in town in terms of your programs. And because of that fact, it's a limited opportunity for yourself to be able to collaborate with peers, to see what else someone else is doing. Right now, you're doing a great job by stepping outside of your classroom to invest and figure out and engage and see what's going on out there in the world of ACTE. But beyond that, because you're one of one, there's a level of accountability that may keep you insulated in such a way that may not help you. And so the first thing I want you to consider is to break down the barriers within the walls within you, right? How often do you step outside of yourself to be able to engage, so on and so forth? But more importantly, and this is where we start to break down the idea of poverty as it pertains to exposure and opportunity. What relationships are you going to start to foster? If you have no relationships with your programs, you need to get them, right? Industry partnerships are essential because industry wants to be a part of the school system. Industry wants to know how to fit in, but oftentimes it's unfortunate that we don't have a strong enough vision of more specific idea of what we want from those partnerships, that we limit ourselves to a check. We limit ourselves to a donation. We limit ourselves to very menial things that just can be forgotten in a way that it is not a partnership, but is a handout. You have to be very specific about the partnership that you want to create with these local businesses, companies, whomever, so that they know how to engage with the school. They know how to partner with you. What does it look like for them to come into the school? What does it look like for you to come out of the school and into their world? Set the parameters, establish what that looks like, be very specific, dream big, because guess what? They want to be connected with the school system. It's just a matter of how you define what you need and how you define the relationship and the partnership. The second thing I want you to focus on is the extended opportunities. Now, everybody in the building may not take your class, but how else are you showing up in the school in and of itself so that you could be exposed enough? So somebody like myself, again, there was no education course at the school that I attended, but it was a program after school that allowed me to take part in the educational experience, which then catapulted me to the point where I'm here talking to you right now. So did you have an after school program that you created? Do you have opportunities where you have competitions that you leave the school to take part in that are available to those students that are part of the after school program, and as well as the part of the classes that you have? And what other ways are you using your partnerships to provide internships, externships, field trips, go to places that may then expose their palette of what else is out there. All right. Now, I said a lot, and I shared a lot of these great ideas and all these wonderful things that you could do. But there's always that idea that, hey, you know what? There's going to be an issue with my administration. There's going to be an issue some way, some form, or some fashion with what it is that I want to do because I met these roadblocks before. And I'm going to share with you from the employer standpoint or a leader standpoint as to how to handle those obstacles forthright, right? So the first thing that I would tell you to do is to get out of your head. You have to get out of your head and don't assume that the bureaucracy is going to be the thing that's going to stop you from doing it, so you didn't even try, right? I want you to kind of go to that inner child. Remember when you wanted something and you had to ask your mom for it, because of course dad's a pushover. Unfortunately, that's me. But mom is the Russian judge, and you have to get her to say yes, right? So in most cases, you say to yourself, why is she going to say no? And you go, okay, I got to clean my room. I got to do chores. I got to do all these positive things to make sure that mom is going to be very hard for mom to say no. But these are the things that happen. That's the same way you have to handle this idea of what you were planning to do in your classroom that you believe may be a no or may stop you from moving forward. There's a root cause of the issue that makes administrators say no. And that is around safety and logistics. If you don't plan with regard to safety and logistics, then the likelihood that they're going to say, no, well, let's think about it and so on and so forth, that's more likely it's going to happen to you. So I strongly suggest you plan for solutions versus just thinking about why it's going to say no. You pilot and adjust. Start small. There's a greater impact to doing something small. Saying you want to expose students to careers. Instead of having a career day with all of these different people coming in the building and throughout the building, just have it happen in one class period. Identify what specific career that you want to highlight and let students be a part of that process. It'll then create credibility for you. It then will create credibility between yourself and students. It then gets them in the process. So when you're going to build upon that, you have some legs to stand on. Right? And the third thing that I will mention to you is some market and advocate. And what I mean by this simply is this. Do not do these great things and don't say anything. Do not do these great things and not tell parents. Tell parents about what's going on. Hey, you could actually reach out to them and say, hey, you know what? I'm trying to do this in my classroom. Does any parent have a background in this? And that alone will get one engagement from parents in a way that they have not been engaged with before, because you're also teaching them how to engage with the school. Secondly, use technology, go on the internet and post on social media, have the kids post about what's going on in that classroom. Invite teachers during their planning period to come to the classroom. Because one, you get teachers, core content teachers, to see what else is happening and explore and broaden their horizons, and also give students the opportunity to be seen in a different light than they've been seen in other areas where there's weakness, so to speak. So they get to be proud of the work that they're doing, proud of being seen. Ask that administrator to come during that class period to observe what's going on. Even tell them, hey, you know what? I need you to coach me in this particular area. So I'd like you to come to this class period to take a look at this thing, right? And then last but not least, to create undeniable value. And all the things that you're doing, you should always say to yourself, how relevant, back to that question that that kid asked, why is this important? What does this have to do with me? You need to start there. Everything that you do should be closely aligned to the strength of relevance for students so that they see the value, so that they remain engaged, and that they can never question how much what's going on in this classroom has everything to do with them, has everything to do with the possibility that they're cracking open bigger gaps to then expose them to something so much more important so they can walk away with something and say, you know what, had I not been in this class, I would not have this opportunity. I'm going to give you an example of how well this one school is doing this particular same thing. I visited a school in Canada. It's called the Sizzler High School in Winnipeg. And we went to visit their innovation. And we were standing in one of their classrooms, and it was an animation class. And they were watching a video of animation taking place. And while the animation was taking place and they were having a conversation with the teacher, behind me, there were about 10 kids at different computers, and they just were busying themselves. And at the end of the period, I'd asked the teacher, I said, you know, what are they doing? He said, well, they are working on a project for Nickelodeon, and they are working, they get paid every week and upwards of $500, and they get a project. I'm the project lead, and there's someone else as a contact at Nickelodeon where they're working on a project that I can't tell you the projects, but they're working on it and they're doing the animation for it. And all of those kids were kids that were part of this program called Sizzler Create. And those students are underprivileged students, students that didn't have access financially to things. And those students also have an opportunity to get scholarships to a technical school that will allow them to be able to go into the field in and of itself. And I'm sitting there going, well, how did that happen? And he said, well, honestly, you know, it started out as a program at the school, and it was only 2 of them that were in the CTE program itself, that was CTE department itself. And between the 2 of them, they covered most of the classes or pathways that they had. There are 16 CTE teachers at that school right now. They have partnerships with movie houses, partnerships with a number of animation, tech places, industry partners that all tie into the school in some form or fashion, that has transformed everything that they're doing at that school, to the degree that there are students that travel an hour and a half to get to that school for that program. That's what dreaming big means. That's what vision means. That's what being transformative means. That's what, I guess, reducing the opportunity poverty and reducing exposure poverty will get you. It is that idea of how important it is for you, although we say that we came in to make a difference, to what degree do we really want to make a difference? To what degree do we allow the negativity of what's going on around us to sabotage our joy and steal from our ability to do some great things? The beauty of everything that you guys are doing is that it is a direct connection to the real world. And it'd be such a shame if you don't capitalize on that. Because like myself, I don't know what I could have been had I had more opportunities. I don't know to what degree I would be able to even be in front of you or beyond this place had I had more opportunities to discover who I am. I wrote a book about becoming enough because it took so long for me to figure out who I am as a human being, based upon having to go through so many trials and errors and through so many missteps and to go through so many left turns versus right turns, that had I had more guidance, had I had more support, had I had more love, had I had more care, had I had more of the things that will allow me to identify who I am as a human being, I'd be in a much better place to be confidently moving forward because of all of the support that I received. And I'm fortunate that over time I've been able to receive it. But I'm lucky, I'm fortunate. And you are in a privileged position to be the gatekeeper of opportunity, to be the gatekeeper of experience, to be the gatekeeper of exposure, so that students who feel like they're nothing can have a place to feel like they're somebody. Because believe it or not, your class may be the only class that they feel like they're capable at all. They may be the only class that they'll get up in the morning to come to that building. They may cut every class and just come to your class, because in your class, you create a safe space where they're able to have a voice. In your class, you created a safe space where they have collaboration, they feel valued, and they are identifying with something else that they had deep down inside of them that you brought out in them. So when you go to work every day, when you plan over the summer, don't plan based upon the limitations that you set in yourself. Plan based upon the exponential experience that you can provide for somebody you've never met, because they're counting on you to do that. So I thank you for doing the very, very hard thing and making it look very easy. I thank you for taking the time that you need to take for yourself to recharge, to then become the person that students need for you. And I appreciate all the work you're going to do over summer for yourself, so that you are capable of being the best person or best version of yourself, because you give so much of yourself each and every day. So I thank you. In the corner of the link over there is follow me on everything. And it's a very heavy conversation, but as much as I could probably provide to you in this moment is what I hope that you got from it. So I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your engagement.
Wow, that was awesome, 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 awesome. Dr. Broadhead, thank you so very much. I'm supposed to be keeping up with the time, but I was like, oh my gosh, he's concluding. I'm just sitting here glued to everything because everything that you have said is just, I don't know about for the rest, well, I'm sure for the rest of our participants, it's just been very inspirational. Some of the points that you've made about, just making children feel valuable, and we as educators didn't go into this not thinking that we can make a difference and not to get sidetracked by those with negative, intentions or negative thoughts. And I think what you said has just been very key. I've written lots of notes, but I want to get to one of the questions that was proposed. Is you talked about some of the instructional strategies. I'm just kind of ad-libbing a little bit for here, but you talked about some of the different things that you're doing, or some of the things that as far as making children feel valuable, and then us as teachers. But what are some of the does your school have instructional or school-wide instructional strategies that you're using to help to build this culture of including children and being responsive to their needs?
Well, it definitely starts with articulating the clarity of what you're there to do, right? So from a leadership standpoint, we say, hey, it's important that you have empathy. It's important that you recognize who kids are. It's important that you build culture and community in your classroom that allows you spaces and opportunities to give a pulse check on who they are and what they bring to the table. So you're not just forging forward. It's important that we recognize that young ladies and gentlemen are people, right? So, and we all as educators, we have to perform. Like we come into class, we have to perform, even though we had a bad day, bad week, whatever bad moment before we got there, we have to perform. And so that takes maturity, emotional intelligence to be able to still do that anyway, that children do not have yet, and they're incapable of having. So recognizing that there's grace that needs to be a part of your everyday approach to educating students is first and foremost. Secondly, art integration is another more specific means by which we approach education in and of itself. So it's not just about demonstrating your knowledge from a standpoint of being able to answer this question or answer this, respond to this essay, but being able to tap into different modalities of their ability to showcase what they understand and learn and know, so that they don't have to wait for that one CTE class to do that project thing. They don't have to wait for one place that dance or that ballet class they're in to showcase their skill. So it's as appreciated and as warranted in math for you to perform, or you to demonstrate who you are. So who you are is at the forefront of who we're teaching. So I would say that would be the strategy or the approach that we take when it comes to being able to allow all students to be seen.
Okay. Excellent, excellent. Another question was, in what ways do teachers in your school ensure that all students are engaged and challenged? I guess they're talking more about, I think with looking at this question, the apathetic student or even the apathetic teacher, and just some of the things that you're doing to build relationships from the administrative level all the way down to just that individual classroom.
Okay. I'll clarify this first. The role that I'm in is no longer in building level. All right. I'm in the building level, meaning that I build schools. So prior to that, I could speak to some degree of what's being done based upon what I've been able to observe, but the intricacies of it is not going to be an area that I'll be able to speak to more specifically, because I'm outside of the school in of itself, right? I'm helping them to expand and grow. So can you tell me that question one more time, and then I'll do my best to answer that question again.
Okay, I guess they're basically just keeping kids engaged, because I know I'm just thinking when you talk about keeping kids engaged, sometimes they're apathetic. You talked about some of the home struggles that children have. Are there specific things that you all are doing to build those relationships, like maybe specific activities? Maybe you can give some examples of some things that school-wide. So I'm kind of thinking what it may be asking.
Well, one of the things that I've seen the principal do is create a culture of cohort and like groups that, like, he almost made of that's like a Harry Potter type of approach, right? So each each homeroom was like team so-and-so, and he built responsibility and teamwork with regard to that. There's days within the week that it's about that team building. There's days in the week where they are, it's like kind of spirit days, so to speak. So it's a disruptive way to recognize the talents and recognize the individual and keep students engaged. There's also a day of the week where there are presenters that come into the building that do some of the work in terms of talking about their journey and speaking to where they came from and how they got there. So I believe the disruption in terms of what happens from day to day is another way to keep students guessing from what's going to happen. So it's not like, because we're quickly fall into a pattern. So kids recognize that pattern, right? They're going to give a test every Tuesday. Okay, that's a pattern. Pattern and structure is good, but at the same time, it's like, well, we need a pattern that's going to be more engaging than a pattern that's going to be mundane. And I think that by leaning into the pattern of engagement, then the pattern of being mundane is where the apathy falls off, because the community that you're creating in your school is going to be now different than the community that revolves around them outside of the school, right? So we have to break them from the habits of the things that they would get a normal response from in their community by creating a new sense of community in the school itself.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And I know we're kind of pressed on our time, but I've got one more question. And then after this question, I would like to ask if you would be willing to share your information, contact information in our chat, maybe for our folks, if they would be able to reach you also. And I think it will be on, maybe there's a slide or something too, but the next question, and we've got just about 1 or 2 more minutes, is how would you request information about industry partnerships?
Okay. All right. So it's what I call as an MOU, right? So it's kind of boots on the ground. So you would use your social media network. Honestly, you can start with your parents. Like say, hey, because they work for somebody somewhere, right? And say, hey, I'm trying to do this. Can you get me in contact with so-and-so in your community or whatever, or you're in your business? That's an easy start, right? The second thing was literally send an email to looking whatever that industry is that you're looking to communicate with. There's divisions and departments, right? There can be community outreach part of that division of that particular business or corporation. You reach out directly to that person, make contact, make them know that you're not spam. Call them, literally call them, and then set up a brief conversation and say, hey, I'd like to be able to do da-da-da. And if you can, create some type of quick blurb about your school. And then that will allow the first conversation to take place. And then what you do, then you create as an MOU, it's a memorandum of understanding. And that is where you say, hey, I would like you to be able to support my school in this way throughout this school year. And then they agree or they disagree or what have you. Then you kind of come to terms of what that looks like. But and honestly, you get more yeses than nos, especially when you're specific. When it's not about money, a lot of times, it really helps that to happen much faster.
An excellent point too, and businesses do, because these are where they're getting their future workers from. They're interested in what's going on in the school. So I encourage those people who are asking, the person who asked that question, to form those partnerships. And again, we have to close it out because we do want to make sure that we're very cognizant of everybody's time. But Dr. Broadhead, this was an excellent resource. I know it has sparked my fire for the start of the new year for sure. And I'm certain, again, with all of our other participants on too. But I would like to give this moment, if anybody from ACTE, Ms. Mott, anyone, Susan Hall, Ms. Lamp, anyone, if you have any comments or questions here as we close for closing remarks. And then I also want to remind us that this presentation will be available on the ACTE website. You do not have to be a member of ACTE to watch this presentation. So do be sure to share it with your friends, especially as we're getting ready to start the school year. But you do have to create an account, but you can go to the ACTE webinar section and find IAED, and you'll find this presentation posted in just a little while. Okay. All right. Ms. Mott.
Hey, everyone. Thank you again, Dr. Broadhead, for your presentation. It was really great. I love the part where you had no fluff zone at the end of the process of dealing with obstacles. That is very important to be authentic in order to overcome challenges. And so I did want to, before we leave today, I wanted to say, we are going to be updating the website, the IAED website for ACTE, which can be found here. So over the course of the summer, you'll be able to see new resources and things that are provided for ACTE members in the greater CTE community. If you have any thoughts or questions, suggestions, oh, you know what? I cannot send people things, but I think Audrey can, to send my email address. So if anyone has any additional information or thoughts or things that should be on the website, or any questions for me as the IAED manager, please, you can contact me. And lastly, IAED mentorship program application should be opening up later this week on the 15th. And so please apply to be a mentee or a mentor for that program. We definitely need to keep the community of practice going and continue to have authentic conversations just like this and other issues and trends that impact the CTE community. And that's all I have.
Okay, and excuse me, with that, we will close out our webinar for today. And again, we want to thank ACTE, specifically Dana Lamp, for always being so gracious and setting these events up for us. We also want to thank our Region 2 Vice President, Beth Parks, for her participation in hosting these and making certain that we're able to provide these. And again, Susan Hall, who is on the social media committee and also specifically the IAED committee for Region 2, for working with our committee and myself as the chair with bringing this webinar together. And Dr. Broadhead, again, kudos. And I am definitely getting on these resources that you've listed in the chat. And thank you all for joining us. We wish you a wonderful summer. And for those who are listening, come back and visit on this website and look at some of the different resources available through ACTE.